you can't tell me, as someone who lived through that, who's paid for this government my entire life, whose birthright ownership in this government is, I was born here, this is my government, I'm an owner of this government. You can't look at me and say, you don't have a right to know. F you. Yes, I do. And I think if you had a couple 100 million people making that case and saying, I want to know now. To me, 9/11 happened like yesterday. It was 24 years ago. But I knew someone on one of the planes. I immediately went to the Middle East after 9/11, completely changed my life, changed the country. So the idea that, you'd want to reassess that 24 years on, I didn't really have that much interest in reassessing it. I was kind of happy with the conclusions that I had. These 19 random Muslims attacked America because they hated our freedoms. And we just wound up with the TSA and the Patriot Act, but those are basically well-intentioned. And that was most people's conclusion after 9/11, and I didn't have a ton of interest, again, in reaching other conclusions because it's just too dark. But we had a conversation with former Congressman Weldon in Pennsylvania, who also reached very conventional conclusions about 9/11 until he started pressing as a member of Congress and got all kinds of questions that couldn't be answered, really obvious questions. Like, where's the wreckage to Flight 93 in Shanksville? Why is there so little wreckage? Like, what? Why do people see other aircraft in the sky next to it? Like, what is that? And for his effort, he lost his congressional seat. The Bush administration came out against him, and he lost his seat. And they took his daughter into custody, never charged him with a crime, but they staged an FBI raid on his daughter's house, made sure it was in every paper in the congressional district. He lost, wrecked his life, wrecked his daughter's life, but he didn't stop asking questions. And so at the time I spoke to him, he was thoroughly convinced on the basis of a lot of evidence that the story that the rest of us heard about 9/11 was a complete lie. And so he successfully convinced me that we needed to look into it. So we spent many months on this documentary. And I was worried that it was going to make me more radical than I want to be, and I had every reason to worry, actually, because it did. There are indisputable facts in that documentary that shocked me. So the majority of the 19 hijackers got their visas to the United States. They were Saudi citizens, got them in Saudi Arabia. Guess who the CIA station chief in Riyadh was when they got those visas? Mr. John Brennan, future director of the CIA. That was the first step in a long chain that connects the CIA and the NSA to those hijackers. They clearly abetted their arrival in the United States. They helped them. They surveilled them. Foreign intel agencies clearly did too. It's very obvious looking at the facts that there were foreign countries that had foreknowledge of 9/11. Just really no question about that at this point. We've been discouraged from even noting that, but it's true. But certainly our intel agencies were in contact indirectly with the hijackers. What is that? Well, of course, we never got a straight answer to it at all. And then what exactly happened on September 11th? Well, I can't answer that question conclusively, but I learned a couple of things that stunned me. One was we don't have a clear picture of what the structural collapse of those three buildings looked like because the material, the steel from the building, was removed immediately within hours. It was a process that extended through days, of course, weeks. But that process began within hours of the collapse of the buildings. That steel was shipped out of New York, in many cases offshore to Asia, before it could be evaluated by structural engineers in the United States. What would be the purpose of that? This is a crime scene in which thousands of people died, and you immediately ship the evidence to China? Tell me why. Why did you do that? And because they did that, the Bush administration did that, and authorities in New York did that, there have been lingering questions that still don't have satisfactory answers about how those buildings fell in the way they did. Uniquely in the history of building fires, those three buildings collapsed in on themselves on videotape, so we know, including a building, Building 7, that was not even touched by a commercial airliner. It never got hit by a plane, and yet it collapsed that afternoon. So people have been asking these questions for 24 years, and to my great discredit and shame, I mocked them for asking those questions, but of course I was ignorant, and I didn't want to know what the truth was. But the more you look into it, the more disturbing it becomes. For example, it is true. It is not a conspiracy theory that an analysis of the dust from Building 7, from the collapse of Building 7, World Trade Center 7, the one that was not hit by a plane, shows that in that dust are bits of explosive. What? This is a building that, again, I don't have videotape of people, putting TNT around the structure of the building. Can't say there was a controlled demolition. No one has admitted participating in it. But it is true that an analysis, a chemical analysis of the dust from that building found explosives. And no one has bothered to explain how that could be. At very least, the American public, whose lives were and country completely upended and changed forever, as someone who's old enough to remember life before 9/11, I can tell you it bore no resemblance to life now. I think we should demand, and I mean forcefully demand, unequivocally demand, full disclosure of all documents related to 9/11. And don't give me some bullshit story about how it's a national security threat to tell me the truth about what happened in my country to people I know 24 years ago. And then you go and you kill millions of people, literally millions of people died. Millions of people died, most of them innocents, in the war on terror. Thousands of Americans were killed, or their lives were destroyed, or they killed themselves later. The entire Bill of Rights, the core of the Bill of Rights, is basically evaporated. The government can do whatever it wants to you. It can spy on you. It can throw you in prison without charging you for years. What? That would be unthinkable. Guantanamo Bay would have been unthinkable before 9/11. Now it's just accepted. So you can't tell me, as someone who lived through that, who's paid for this government my entire life, whose birthright ownership in this government is, I was born here, this is my government, I'm an owner of this government. You can't look at me and say, you don't have a right to know. F you. Yes, I do. And I think if you had a couple 100 million people making that case and saying, I want to know now, actually, son. Can you hear me? I think our whole posture toward government needs to change. I'm not a supplicant. I'm not here to kiss your ass or ask your permission. I'm your boss. This is my government. You just work here. Give me the documents right now. That's the attitude. And that's the only attitude that produces results. Why are we putting up with this? And I'm sorry if it's embarrassing to some foreign government, or it's embarrassing to John Brennan or Jim Clapper or whomever, some other discredited creep. Tough. I mean, if I get arrested on suspicion of committing a crime, I can't say, I'm sorry, I can't. I'm not going to comment, national security reasons. They might embarrass me. I don't want to be implicated in my own wrongdoing. Shut up. Answer the question. The posture toward me is one of unbridled aggression and entitlement. The authorities feel entitled to know what I'm doing at all times. They won't let me on a plane unless they scan my facial features and preserve facial recognition data on me. Okay? So they treat me like a slave. I think it's time to invert the deal a little bit here. I'm not the slave. They're the employees. And I mean it. And the core idea of America is there are rights that precede government that were given to me by God, and government's only job is to secure those rights, to defend them on my behalf. And so if government is not defending those rights, but instead stripping them from me, it's not a legitimate government. Sorry. By its own rules, by its own logic, it's not a legitimate government. It's a tyrannical government. We need a new commission, obviously. The 9/11 commission run by Philip Zelikow was utterly fraudulent. He wrote the 9/11 commission report before any of the reporting had come in. He wrote it before the investigation started. Okay. It's absurd. So now's the time to demand full disclosure. For the purposes of discovering what happened on 9/11, the only thing that will produce results is shut up and give me the documents. That's it. If enough people say that, and I hope to kick that off.